Biggest human trafficker in the country is the organization combined among all the 50 states of the Child Protective Services departments run by each state. They are notorious for stealing children from their parents, and one standard that they have to meet in seizing children is that the child is adoptable. There is a ruling out of Arizona brought to my attention by medicalkidnap.com that has a judge, an appellate court judge, stating this very thing, and making the argument that we can't have children stolen, kidnapped effectively from their mothers and fathers just because they are adoptable, just because the mom or dad has had a question to a doctor, has maybe perhaps demanded a second opinion, or maybe has said, well, we're not going to vaccinate our children. These are an important problem. These problems are an important one to consider. This medical kidnap says it's a stunning reversal of the termination of parental rights in Arizona. The Arizona Department of Child Safety, DCS, took children from their mother primarily because they were considered adoptable. And the quote is out of Maricopa County, and a 3-judge panel presided over by Judge Peter Swan says that in that state human trafficking case, that was the main cause, right? That was the main reason. It was a 15-page ruling addressing the DCS's argument to sever parental rights based on that theme. In evaluating the child's best interest, the lower court found that both children were adoptable, that their respective placements are meeting their needs, and that they would gain permanency and stability through severance. The department argues this is sufficient to establish best interests. We disagree, and he opposed the constitutional right to parent. So parenting is a constitutional right, and he cites the U.S. High Court's case, Santosky versus Kramer. The fundamental liberty interest of natural parents in the care, custody, and management of their child does not evaporate simply because they have not been model parents or have lost temporary custody of their child to the state. Even when blood relationships are strained, parents retain a vital interest in preventing the irretrievable destruction of their family life. If anything, persons faced with forced dissolution of their parental rights have a more critical need for procedural protections than do those resisting state intervention into ongoing family affairs. So adoptability is not in its own sufficient to overcome a parent's constitutional rights. And so this is a federal standard, and notice what happens whenever you have a standard, whenever there's a rule somewhere, it becomes a knife, right? That's why we are here on the David Tulis Show, and we make all of our points in sans serif type. I like Helvetica typeface because it's neutral. The Swiss are the great neutral people of the world, and the serifs are what you find, let's say, in Courier or New York or Times, the popular font, the little feet, right? The A with the 2 feet on the bottom of the legs that meet at the top of the point. Those feet are serifs, and they're really not shoes. They're more like knives. And I like to do all my writing in sans serif type because I don't want to cut anybody. When it's in the statute, though, in the U.S. Code and the Tennessee Code annotated, it's with serifs, and that's because the words have cutting power. They cut into things, and they shed a lot of blood. That's what you have when you have a positivist law system. Now, I have people who are conservatives who I want to correct. I'm often correcting conservatives, and I'm doing it because they have a faith in law. They believe somehow, just like the left, that if there's something wrong in society, we just have to have some more compulsion redirected. And so much of the conservative argument is not overturning socialism or overturning the progressive agenda, but simply modifying it. And what's happened is that the Republicans and the conservatives have adopted almost entirely what the old school socialists and progressives held on. And of course, on the Democrat side, you have the ferocious revolutionaries proposing yet new innovations. And that's That's what the Democrats are doing. They're totally inhuman, I would say. Danielle Mitchell perhaps accepted. She's just deluded, but she's a very nice person. And in fact, her business here in Hickson, which is a sports injury place, is in the free market. Though she herself signed up for Obamacare, according to her Facebook post, she runs her business in the free market model, and we have to commend her for that. We have to hope that her practice will influence her ideology at some point. And the idea that we argue in Sans Stereotype is that we want there to be an argument for the truth, and the Lord says He's concerned about worship in spirit and in truth, right, among His people. And so truth has to prevail, and the right spirit, the Holy Spirit, as well. Now, the conservatives often think they're conservative, but they're really not. They're really just socialists and progressives. And for example, on the whole idea of making immigrants obey the law and all that, most of that is completely unexamined and schizophrenic. The free market position is that temporarily adopted by the left, and that would be the open borders position. That is the free market position that used to be the conservative viewpoint, right? The viewpoint of the classical liberal. That's me. I'm a classical liberal. That means to say I'm a free market. You could say free market conservative, but it's actually, in the realms, in the way of thinking of Ludwig von Mises or Frédéric Bastiat, the French nobleman, the great writer, or even Alexis de Tocqueville. They were all conservatives. They're really classical liberals, and they're all about liberty and being gracious to other people, not allowing and not tolerating cartels and monopolies. And most Republicans are cartel and monopoly oriented. They favor commercial government, and they favor the state being used to prop up one line of work or another, one group of people or another. Their favorites, right? It's always protecting their favorites. The Democrats favoring gigantic corporate labor unions, and the conservatives and the Republicans favoring corporations and amassed debt capital. They're not free marketers at all. And so my grievance is on your behalf here in New Radio is on behalf of the marketplace and liberty. So we argue for local economy and free market every day here at 9 o'clock on 92.7. And I wanted to mention to you, we've got a very fun little event coming up on Saturday, which is Small Business Saturday. We have a desire to meet some of our advertisers, and we're going to be running much of our show Saturday from their counters, their business domains. We're looking forward to being, for example, at Lois Groceries, and there are several Lois Groceries in Chattanooga run by George Lois and his family. Wonderful place to go. And you, my Anglo-Saxon listener, right? You, my black listener, go to the Mexican grocery, right? Don't just go to the aisles, the Mexican aisles at Walmart or Food City. Go to an actual Mexican grocery, okay? Why don't you just try that? And you should try Lois Grocery. There's one right here in Hickson. In fact, it's right next to Riley's Wine and Spirits, and right next to Shooter Supply. Those three shops right next to each other, all within a pistol shot. And not coming from Shooter Supply, of course, right there. They restrain their aiming to the range in the basement down at Shooter Supply. All the bullets go into the range at Shooter Supply. So there we will be Saturday early, and some other businesses as well, including Covenant Credit and Mountain Oaks Wedding, Chapel Noodlewall, Rick Davis Golden Diamonds, the big, the noisome cash distributor here in Chattanooga and Brainerd, and Escape Experience, which you are hearing our wonderful ad for. Do call Escape Experience. And Two Crazy Greeks, Paco. Maybe you can hear about Paco. He is a real character, entirely New York Greek. You will love eating there. And also the Knife Shop and Harry's Wine and Spirits on Signal Mountain, and East Brainerd Wine and Spirits in East Brainerd, and Riley's here in Hickson. We are in Hickson, Nooga Radio, and we're the Chattanooga station, the station for the man who matters, David Tulis. I do thank you for giving me just a minute of your time. Our show every day brought to you by Nooganomics.com, an unpopular website because it really aims at a very small group, a select group of people, those who matter. Okay, those people who matter subscribe to Nooganomics.com, and they don't fail to await my next missive. And I've got several in the hopper. I do thank you for giving me just a minute of your Love your time today. David Tulis, love your neighbor, buy local. That's our argument, and that's the argument at the Amex's Small Business Saturday, Amex American Express, the credit card company. A very old program every Saturday after Thanksgiving. Go to your local small business. Love your neighbor and buy local. That's my mantra, if you will, here on the David Tulis Show. Now, about these federal laws that are so wonderful, right? We need to have federal law enforced against immigrants, and I think that there's a problem there, and it comes from a popular delusion that conservatives have, and they think that somehow if we have the ICE and the federal police and others enforcing American law against illegals who are here and so on, that they are somehow going to escape. Well, that's just a lie. You cannot have tyranny against one group of people, the stranger and the alien, right? The category protected by God in the Bible. You cannot have a tyranny by law, a discrimination by law against innocent, non-criminal people in this country from another country and escape the tyranny. You cannot do it, and you will not escape it. And here's the story from Reason Magazine, a story by Sakia Delmia in the December edition. And it's a heartrending account of how immigration crackdowns are screwing up Americans' lives. The war on immigration has taken a great toll on unauthorized aliens as targets, but it is also badly affecting Americans themselves, its intended beneficiaries. You cannot have an abuse of one group like blacks in Chattanooga, walking while black, driving while black in Chattanooga. You cannot have an attack on the people whom the establishment considers sort of trash. You cannot have an attack on people considered to be trash by the law and the state, and not you yourself, my upper end listener, my high end listener, and be unaffected. Jacqueline Stevens is a political scientist at Northwestern University and a specialist in deportation law, and she estimates that in 2010 alone, in 1 year, 7 years ago, more than 4,000 U.S. citizens were detained or deported as aliens. Okay, got that? 4,000 American citizens detained or deported as aliens between 2003 and 10. All right, just ask yourself about your mode of thinking, okay? More than 20,000 Americans suffer the same fate. At any given time, Stevens maintains about 1% of the inmates in immigration detention nationwide are American citizens. That figure may sound unbelievable, Sikha Dalmia says in her report, but in fact, it is a conservative estimate. In principle, it is illegal for immigration authorities to detain U.S. citizens, much less deport them. But the reality is different. Once someone is swept into the Kafkaesque nightmare of immigration system, they are effectively assumed to be illegals until proven otherwise. What's more, the standard due process protections that are afforded to ordinary criminals are not extended to suspected illegal immigrants. And she tells of several stories. One of a man named Lorenzo Palma. He was a 40-year-old man, and as he learned, people accused of a civil offense aren't entitled to court-appointed lawyers. Worse, suspected illegal immigrants aren't accorded individual trials. They're part of mass stamping by judges, overworked immigration judges. They hold mass hearings under and they heed the recommendations of immigration and customs enforcement. It's called a legal death, and where Americans are stripped of their rights and exiled to another country. She has documented many cases where citizens who have lives and loving families in the U.S. are forced to live as destitutes, that is to say, poor, in foreign countries. In one instance, she discovered a homeless American in Mexico bathing in the Tijuana River, rummaging through garbage to feed himself. And she tracked another American drifting among shelters in various Latin American countries. In a surreal reversal, says Stevens, there are even Americans trying to eke out a living as day laborers in Mexico City. Palma says, he tells NPR, I'm blessed with the people that helped me. I'm blessed, but I feel that the system is not on the right track. They do whatever they want to do. And of course, Donald Trump, the president of the federal empire, has made that promise of interior enforcement. Interior enforcement. That would be roadblocks on desert highways, hundreds of miles inland. Hundreds of miles inland, there are roadblocks run by the good people. And we think somehow that we can have drone strikes, as we have drone strikes in Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya and Syria, taking out the bad guys, right? Not injuring anybody. Well, it doesn't work like that. It's always a carpet bombing program. Now, here's a story about Jason Levesque, who's a 46-year-old man, father of 5, a former Marine. He used to own 180 Hardee's and Carl's Jr. burger joints in the Midwest and the Southwest. And the story about him is that he had many H-2B worker visas among his staff. That number is annually capped at 66,000 people. About a quarter of the demand. His travails began in 2013. When President Bush was in charge, he had SWAT-style ICE raids, but under Obama, under 8 years there, the feds depended on audits. ICE would let government auditors loose on a company's books to pore over I-9 forms looking for evidence of malfeasance and improprieties in hiring. And when that came to this businessman, who came at a very inopportune time. He was already overextended from a franchise buying spree, and ICE asked him to hand over 3 years worth of records, which covered 3,000 employees in 7 states. Okay, you have 7 states, 7 sets of records, and the agency gave him 3 days to get the paperwork together. So he had to scrape money together to pay for that and submit that, and there was nothing from ICE for 10 months. And when he didn't hear back, when he did finally hear back, the news wasn't good. The agency had flagged 1,200 employees, almost half the workforce, as suspect. That meant that he was expected to file additional papers to verify their authorization status, this time on a deadline of 10 days. He was devastated and furious. Devastated because some of the workers on the list were his best people, right? Been there for a long time, hardworking people. He says, who had busted their asses to make the company what it was. He had come to know them over the years, and the prospect of firing them was heart-wrenching. The story goes on, and I'm not going to tell you all of it. It's available at Reason, and it's reason.com is the website. That's the libertarian website that has many good reports. Well, this is David Tulis, and I just want you to think about this. If you have a law that offends and oppresses someone, you're not going to be able to escape it. And in fact, you will then have an interest to help out. That's what happens with the verification programs. The government makes employers assist in the dragnet. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to be part of that. So I think there needs to be a fundamental rethinking, particularly among conservative people like you, my listener. I think you think, well, David Tulis is a conservative. I like listening to his show, but I'm not a conservative. Okay, I'm a classical liberal. That means to say I'm for the free market. I'm for the Constitution. I'm for limits upon the state, and I am for a Christian economy, a Christian ethic, if you will, in jurisprudence and justice. Which means, of course, if you're a Christian, you want the precepts of the Ten Commandments to be lived out in practice in the courts, in warfare, by the king as well as the man who runs the street sweeping machine that gets all the grit out of from among the curbs there outside your parking lot. These are the people, high and low, we want to be bound by and respecting of, fearful of, loving of the law of God. That the Ten Commandments being that expression of God's love for people, for humankind. God loves humankind, and it's in the Ten Commandments that he expresses his character and also his requirements on them. And so what I want for you, my listener, on this Thanksgiving Day Eve, is to think in terms of grace. Laws written by men have no greats in them. They have always an ideology, a theory of what's good. And we know that that culture is religion externalized. In the same way, the penal code of a state such as Tennessee, the penal code of a city such as Chattanooga, or of a nation such as the United States is always an externalization of a religious concept. It's always in view there some kind of God or deity who has, of course, his own views of right and wrong. And those of that God are certainly not just. As we can see here in the expulsion of hundreds, thousands of Americans forced to live in exile because they got trapped in the immigration machinery that Donald Trump is gearing up to do more good work here in the national economy, affecting us hopefully favorably right here in the Chattanooga local economy. This is David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and